Thank you, everybody. We'll probably have a few more come in, and I just want to thank Mike Roizen for his time and his effort. And I really don't have to give a formal introduction to Mike because most of us have followed Mike through his books, at our reunions, and his numerous appearances on TV. Mike's biography is on the promotion of this talk, but Mike is the Chief Wellness Officer Emeritus at Cleveland Clinic, and his latest book, The Great Age Reboot, will I'm sure not be the culmination of his lifelong passion for wellness and his research into the latest developments to help us live longer and younger, because he will live longer and younger and will write many more books. Some serious thoughts and then some humorous observations concerning trends in the area of our wellness. After the talk Mike gave at our 40th reunion, my wife and I have seriously considered giving up our golden retriever dog, because the dog tends to tie one down, and the golden retriever's right here by me, came down right now. However, each time we say, remember Mike's talk? What a better way to get on our steps each day. I do count part of my good health and good attitude to our golden retriever. On another serious note, on the Oxford trip leading up to our 50th, I chatted with Bob Barr about my dad's age-related macular degeneration. I was concerned about my own prospects, and Bob assured me that one of the advances in treatments will be for AMD. I now also have AMD, as I've told Mike, and the advances in treatment allow me to see my stray golf shots go zooming into the rough. Mike will be able to tell us of more of the major developments in not only AMD, but other age-related life-diminishing diseases and symptoms. Finally, I must tell you, even though I read The Great Age Reboot and watched on YouTube Mike's presentation at our 40th, I wanted to see if I could find some shortcuts to living longer and younger. Like all of us, I worried about diet, energy, heart disease, memory, cancer, and depression. Thank goodness, by watching ads on TV, I have found a polypharmacy. I do not want to ruin Mike's careful research, but here goes. Each morning I take Dr. Ohina's probiotics and Ozempic for diet, Prevagen for memory, Balance of Nature for energy, Eliquis for the heart, Lexapro for depression, and Keytruda for cancer. Mike, who needs a dog and a qualified doctor when you have social media ads and TV ads? However, I need to talk to my own doc now because I'm not feeling well lately. And my psychiatrist has pointed out I'm a cyberchondriac and now has added double doses of Prozac to my polypharmacy. Getting serious again, thank goodness we have many qualified medical professionals in our class, and many are on the screen, who have dedicated their careers to educating patients on the facts and choices for a unique treatment plan for individual healthiness. In this time of constant ads and disinformation and exponential change in the field of wellness and longevity, we are fortunate to have Dr. Roizen talk to us about the potential of being 90 again, 90 the new 40. Michael, my friend, the Zoom screen is yours.
Larry, thank you. I have to apologize a little bit for my voice. I was at the Cavs game last night. As many of you probably know, my wife and I are avid basketball fans because of our height. And I yell at the referees. So I say childish things like, you know, use your other eye, you know, the good one. So I'm hoarse from yelling at referee number 10. This talk actually arose out of some trash talking a co-author of mine did. We would play avid ping pong games, much as I used to play with Steve Orr in squash. And but my opponent in ping pong would try and get an advantage by getting me to focus on medicine rather than ping pong. And so he'd say, "What's new?" And I described what was happening in the area of aging mechanism research. That is the research into why we age. And the process was that he would then try and distract me. I'd try and distract him by talking about his field, which he was the CEO for 25 plus years of Forest City Enterprises, which built Barclays Place and redid Stapleton, etc. So that's why the book has both economists on it, a demographer, as well as myself. But the message is that you can be 40 again with at least an 80% probability. This is not slowing aging. That's what we've done up to now. But this is actually reversing it. What do I mean by, excuse me, what do I mean by that? I'm going to show you in a second. So if you look at the DNA damage that occurs, one of the theories of aging is that it changes our epigenes. We have, when the Human Genome Project started, both at NIH and Cooper and Ventnor and Private World, we expected to find 300,000 genes because of the amount of DNA in our nucleus. We found only 22,500, and initially they called the rest of the DNA junk. But they soon learned it was switches that we get to use to control our genes. That is, you have rheostats that upregulate or downregulate whether your genes are producing proteins or not. All genes do is serve as a protein factory or watch other genes. Soon thereafter, a guy named Yamanaka did 12 million experiments in Japan and found that if we turned on these 4 genes, all the DNA damage we had over our lifetime could be reversed. And it turned out he found that 2 already approved medications, already approved and generic already, when done in the right combinations, would turn on these 3 genes, these 4 genes, and make old mice young again. And not only did they get young, they lived about 50% longer. Not only did their hair get younger and their fur get younger, but so did their brains. And here you can see their muscle and their pancreas and their heart. Every cell in their body got young again. And in fact, the male mice procreated again. So in fact, this is very different than saying in this model, 100-week-old mouse can get to be a 35-week-old mouse, not by slowing aging, but by reversing it. Or in the human terms, a 95-year-old Williams graduate could get to be a 40-year-old go back to college graduate again if he wanted to. That is, you'll be able not to slow aging, but to get younger again. This has happened in 14 different areas of aging research. This is just one of them. Where has this been done? It's been done at 5 major institutions, a private company outside UC Davis, at Harvard, MIT. It's been replicated at Hopkins, at a university in Switzerland, and now the Coleco, which is a Google moonshot on aging, has redone it. And it's been done not in just 2 species, but in 3 different species, mice, guinea pigs, and beagle dogs. So this is, if we have 14 shots on goal, this being one of them, And by the way, this is moving into human trials in Italy. If you have 14 shots on goal, it's likely with at least an 80% probability that if you make it 10 years without major structural damage, you're going to be able to reboot yourself to 40 again. What's happened in longevity? Well, since about 1890, men shown in green, women in blue, have increased our life expectancy by about 2.5 years every 10 years. First, due to sanitation and improvements of the health of the young, more recently, due to chronic disease management in high blood pressure and arterial disease and diabetes, etc. And that's actually continued on the coasts where you don't have as much opioid usage. But in the next 10 years, we expect an increase of 30 years. Why? Because of the exponential increase, and I love doing that, so I'm going to do it again, because of the exponential increase in research into the mechanism of aging. So a linear step, you take 30 of them, you get 30 yards closer to your goal. An exponential step, you get 26 times around the earth with 30 of them, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, etc., 26 times around the earth. So we expect with at least a 80% probability that we're going to be able to reboot ourselves to a great degree. What we've learned in the last really 5 years is 3 things, major things about health. And when I'm saying this, these have all been confirmed in at least 4 studies in humans. The first is we understand compounding of health. So just like if you save money early, it compounds and it builds up. The same is with health. If you lower your LDL cholesterol from 140 to 70, it reduces risk about 10% in the first 10 years. But it reduces it by year 30 to 40 by about 60%. So there's a compounding of benefits as you get health. The second is as a multiplier. If you get healthy in all of the 6 major areas, blood pressure, LDL cholesterol, fasting, blood sugar, body mass index, weight, and stress management, you get about a 3-fold multiplier effect on risk reduction compared to if you only get it for 5 of the 6. We did this at the Cleveland Clinic with our 101,000 employees and dependents. That's really how I spent my time from 2008 to 2019. And it was to motivate employees. We incentivized them just by paying them to get healthy. And instead of 6% having normal values, 6 plus 2 normals, and 12% participating in the chronic care program in 2008. And by the way, the 6% having 6 normals is exactly what the national average is for 47-year-old people, which was our average age of our workforce and dependents. We increased that to, in 19, to about 45%, and 74% participated in the program. And what did that do compared to our competitors and compared to our own trend line and national averages? We saved 38% of healthcare costs, meaning the net savings by 2019 were $1.3 billion. And that doesn't even include the $250 million our employees got back in savings on their own health insurance costs, and probably $500 million more in copays. So the third point is the importance of the difference in slowing aging, which all of us should be doing now, because we need to keep our structures normal, to rebooting it if you have normal structures. And let me remind you, it is rebooting it. It isn't just slowing aging. So where did this come from, and what's the key for society? Well, if you look at the CBO figures, when I testified on what the Cleveland Clinic had done, and to try and get the government to do that for all Medicare patients, because it would save us around 700 billion, 680 billion to be specific, in federal costs in 2019, the CBO said, forget it. We don't count any savings over the age of 65. Everybody over the age of 65 is a cost to the government, not a savings. There can't be any savings in Medicare over the age of 65. And using their calculations, our GDP goes down because our birth rate has gone down. Every country in the world has. And because of that and the lack of people and workers, our GDP would mean that our trust funds run out of money. Social Security, you've heard about, Medicare as well. And essentially the government goes broke slowly. But in fact, we expect not the values that the government has been projecting, but in fact, which is, if you will, about a 33 million person increase in population by 2050. We expect it to be closer to 117 million. And if you will, you and I will be part of that population, because the majority of the new people, 59% of the additional, quote, increase in population, will be us who are already here and will be 80 and older at that time. We won't be dying as fast if we make it 10 years. So if you're 75, and I use this, I know all of us are 77 or 78 on average. When we were born, it was actually, we were expected to live 67 years or 66 years. We actually are now projected to live, if you're our age, about 86, although the official figure is 82. And my guess is that on average, we will live to be 100, which means we have, whatever it is, 23 more years. All of us have already, who are on the call, have already outlived our expected life expectancy. Males, by the way, it's 3 years younger than this. Let me give you the example of why structural change prevention is so important. In Australia, they took 12 patients with amyloid-induced heart failure. This is a different amyloid than in the brain, but this amyloid is something you acquire from an environmental change that changes one of your genes, and it produces an abnormal protein, which goes to the heart and thus causes heart failure. So these 12 people had ejection fractions. That's the amount of blood the heart can squeezes out with each contraction, of about 12% or less. Their life expectancy was under 12 weeks, in fact. All they could do is lie in bed or sit in a chair at most. But they eliminated, through gene editing, that gene that was producing the abnormal protein. What happened? In 7 of the 12, they got ejection fractions greater than 35%, up from 12%. And instead of having a 12-week or less life expectancy, they now have an 18-year life expectancy. So they're relatively normal when they knocked that out. What happened to the other 5 people? Well, they had structural change so far advanced that they got no benefit. So the point is, you want to prevent as much structural change, stay as young as possible, for the next 10 years or so until the reboot comes. So where did this really come from? It all started with the Human Genome Project. And because of epigenes, we know that you are a genetic engineer. You get to turn on or off over 80% of your genes. The accepted figure from until about 2 years ago was 80%. The last two studies on twins show that maybe it's as high as 94%. So you get to control 94%. So when Elgato stressed his muscles with his walk that he described last week, he turned on a gene in those muscles that produces a small protein called arisen. Arisen goes across the blood-brain barrier and increases brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor by turning on that gene. And that increases the size of the only organ in the body that really matters, your hippocampus, which is your memory center. And so when you stress a muscle, yes, you improve blood flow, and we used to think that was the major thing because it improved oxygen delivery to the brain. But we now know that's only about 20% of the effect. The real effect is in turning on genes that increase your hippocampal size. So the message is you are a genetic engineer for you. Let me give you another example. This one is from 2 days ago's research. This one is from Harvard, MIT, and one of the things they showed was that if you keep your brain active, it actually repairs itself. That is, just like when you use your knee for walking too much, you injure the cartilage, or when you do resistance exercise, you create a small tear in your muscle. When you use your brain cells repeatedly, you actually create a small dysfunction in the neuron by causing if you will, a tear in the connecting dendrite or axon, the connecting portions. Well, it turns out that when you do that, you also turn on a gene that produces the small protein complex NPAS4, which repairs the neuron damage. And thus, you're turning on the repair mechanism and keeping your brains young when you do what we call speed of processing games, which I'll talk to in a few minutes. So you, again, are a genetic engineer for you. So the importance of this is that you get to control how long you live, how well you live, how happily you live. And it really comes from our knowledge of the Human Genome Project. And it really resolves around your choices. The key things, and that's why this is such a great thing that Alan and Larry, you have done with the class, is because our posse is incredibly important at helping us stay young. So posse, purpose, and play are the most important things in helping us stay young because stress is the greatest ager of all. So one of the things we say, since you control it, you should only eat food you love and that loves you back. So food is like a marriage. You wouldn't marry someone who's trying to kill you every day. You shouldn't eat food that's trying to kill you every day. Only eat things you love, but that loves you back. And that's the same with physical activity, and it's the same with everything. You should find things you love your body back. So one of the articles that appeared 2 days ago was there's a sleeping pill maybe that decreases Alzheimer's. But if you look at it, this is fake. It's way too early because it was done in 30 people, but it was a 3-day study that showed it decreased tau and amyloid in the spinal fluid. We have no idea whether that's because it decreases production of the tau and amyloid, or it increases metabolism, or worse, does it block release and increase the risk? So you need someone curating this for you, and that's why I wrote the book. And as you know, my main claim to fame, I'm an academic, so I disclose it was Real Age displaced Harry Potter for 7 days when it came out as #1 on Amazon. When the owner's manual came out, it displaced Harry Potter for 35 days. And when You on a Diet came out, it displaced Harry Potter for still the record 177 days. But the reason, and the only reason to write a new book, is the science changes. And that's happened in this field to a great degree. So there is this is fake science, and you need to have it curated. And that's why we started an app that goes with this. And when that comes out in June, you all will be invited, or we'll invite all the classmates for 3 free months or something on the app. But it is to curate stuff so you don't go down the wrong path, if you will, and that our scientific advisory board knows. If you want to sign up for it in advance, longevityplaybook.com is the website. But there is something that probably will be found to decrease Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, and it's a $4 a month water pill. So this was a study done out of the Gladstone at UC San Francisco, and in combination with the Cleveland Clinic as well, where they looked at using the IBM quantum computing all 1,363 drugs that were approved by the FDA and are generic. So these are all $4 a month drugs. And they said which drugs have been shown to block the attachment of tau and amyloid, two of the abnormal proteins, to the brain cells. And they found that through the 4th degree structure in the quantum computing, it was actually a $4 a month water pill. Bumetanide, water pill meaning a diuretic, and it's largely been replaced by furosemide or hydrochlorothiazide. Well, what this did, they then went to an animal model of Alzheimer's and of other dementias, and they found it blocked those mice from developing dementia almost totally. They then went to a 1.3 million patient database at the Gladstone in San Francisco, and a 3.8 million database that the Cleveland Clinic ushered, and found that compared to other water pills, or compared to people not taking water pills, it decreased the development of dementia by 70 and 72%. So this is now undergoing randomized controlled trials. Clearly, if you're on a water pill or a diuretic for any reason, it might be good to switch to this one. One, it's very cheap, $4 a month. And 2, it might block memory loss. As I said, we'll know in about 2.5 years if it really does so, since it's under a randomized controlled trial. So there are actually, as I said, 14 hot areas. And Larry, you'll have to stop me when you want me to stop and start questions, because I tend to go on too long. But 14 areas, one of which is senolytics. What a senolytic is it harvests old cells. Well, like a piece of old fruit that makes the neighboring fruit rotten, an old cell makes the cells around it rotten. Now you can find that we produce old cells starting in utero, even before we're born, but we don't accumulate them till after age 30. And they do just that. They make the cells around them old, causing dysfunction. And what happens then? Well, let me show you. This was a therapeutic plasma exchange that was used in Alzheimer's dementia to see if harvesting old proteins could make the person recover or help the person recover from the dementia. So she donates a unit of blood. The red cells are washed and she gets them back. The plasma is thrown away and she gets either new albumin or new saline back. And this is, if you want to Google it, it's called the AMBAR studies, AMBAR, randomized, controlled, double blind. And here you see in the mild Alzheimer's disease patients, she did 9 donations over a 5-month period, and still at 15 months, her cognitive function is improving. This is reversal of Alzheimer's disease, as opposed to the bumetanide, which is studied for blocking the protein attachment and preventing it. The control group is shown in black here, continued cognitive decline. This is reversal. They've orally presented at another meeting where even at 32 months, the cognitive function is still improving. Now,
Hey, Mike, it's Larry. I'll give you about a 10-minute warning right now, okay?
You got it.
10 to 12.
So what does this mean? Well, they were going to do, and they have started a 3,000 patient, 100 center study. This was only 6 centers, 2 in Spain, 2 in Chile, University of Pittsburgh and Cleveland Clinic. But their board of directors of the company stopped it because when on analysis, the group that replaced with saline here instead of albumin did just as well at reversing Alzheimer's disease, and the company makes albumin, so they couldn't justify the expense. But it is actually an approved study for phase 3B at the FDA. Let me go and tell you, so these are the 14 areas. My co-author Albert Ratner's favorite one is the elimination of obesity. When you're young, you form brown fat from mother fat to keep you warm. So it produces heat, and it's around our organs so that when our moms can't swaddle us, this fat keeps us warm. After about 6 months, all mother fat turns into mostly white fat, and white fat increases inflammation and our risks of heart disease, stroke, memory loss, type 2 diabetes, liver failure. It's the largest cause of dementia, of 6 cancers related to obesity, and of osteoarthritis. So eliminating obesity would do a great deal for mankind and for saving money in the economy to be used for other things. Well, a number of groups have shown that you can regress white fat to mother fat and then transform it into brown fat. 3 different animal species, the largest of which is sheep. And you say, why did Clemson do this in sheep? It's because sheep can't stop eating either. They develop non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and don't produce wool. So they did it for their agriculture school. And I can talk in the question and answer period about Ozempic or semaglutide and Mounjaro if you want as well. And I've told you my favorite is the epigenetic reprogramming, correcting the errors that we've developed in our switches and turning us back younger. This has been done, as I said, 5 different places, including most recently at Coleco, and 3 different species. Now moving into human trials in Italy with UCLA scientists and scientists from India as well. So we found 22,500 genes, only 1,500 are on at any one time. Which ones are on? At least 80%, maybe 93% or 94% are under your control. This is called a heat map. So a heat map shows the genes that are on in red and those that aren't in green. And this is 52 strips of genes, one strip each from one of each 52 guys with prostate cancer. Here it is a year later. And what happens is they took these genes that were on and turned them off over that year. What did they do to do that? The three guys who smoked quit smoking. They eliminated 5 foods from their diet. They walked 10,000 steps a day, and they meditated 15 minutes a morning and night. Up here, these were off and turned on. What are these two? These two genes produce the GSTM1 proteins that cause prostate, colon, or breast cancer to commit suicide. Conversely, these 5 that they turned off, they encourage the growth of prostate, breast, and colon cancers. It's now 14 years later, and when I talked to Pete Carroll, the co-author, the urologist, only one of the 52 has progressed beyond lifestyle treatment for treatment of their prostate cancer. So you are a genetic engineer for you. So the key point is change your attitude. What you do today matters in how long and well you live. Stress is the greatest ager. It prunes your neurons to make them smaller, the connection smaller, and fades memories. So as I said, the hippocampus is the main memory center. And here you see, this is the hippocampus. This woman was caring for her husband who had Alzheimer's disease, and over a 6-month period, her hippocampal neurons shrunk so that she developed Alzheimer's disease. She not only was caring for her husband, but also a son died suddenly. So caregiver stress is one of the greatest stresses there is. So if you're a caregiver, please do things to protect your own health. So this is what stress does. Excuse me. So this is 25 patients, again, a heat map. They had not had a stress management program here. They did here. This is 16 weeks later, 10 weeks after they finished it. M is a year later. And you see they turned off all these genes, turned on these. What are the ones they turned off? They turned off the genes that produce inflammatory proteins. They turn on the genes that produce anti-inflammatory proteins. Or, if you will, they change 256 genes from on to off or off to on. Again, you are a genetic engineer for you, better than anyone who went to Caltech or MIT. It's a team sport. Guys are generally lousy buddies. This is a typical guy buddy. You can see he's now going to stretch out his buddy. His buddy sees him and immediately, not one question asked, he goes and helps his buddy. That's a male buddy. As a female buddy who encourages you to walk a little faster, and when you need to be picked up, the female buddy will come along and pick you up. So it's important to have buddies. Posse is probably the most important thing. Now I'm going to go over, there are 33 things, and I'll be glad to send the slide set out to anyone. There are 33 things that have been shown in at least 2 studies to prevent brain dysfunction. Just to go over a couple of them. One is keep your immunizations up to date. This is people who've had 0, 3, or 6 flu shots between 59 and 60. This has been repeated 3 times. And what happens is getting 6 flu shots decreased 40% production in dementia. Why is that? It's because flu is a very inflammatory thing. And the flu shot, even if it doesn't prevent flu, prevents a whole bunch of the inflammation, which decreases the risk of dementia, as dementia is thought to be related to a lot of inflammation in your brain. Another two things are speed of processing games, which we're doing now, if you will, as I run through the slides, and 4 components of physical activity. So speed of processing game is behind the start button, you see either the truck or the car, and someplace in the periphery, the Route 66 sign. If you get it right, and I can identify which is behind here after it appears and where the Route 66 sign is, you get less time and it speeds up your brain. That's one of the things that increases that brain repair neuron, as well as increases acetylcholine in controlled areas. In the randomized controlled trials, and there are now 3 of them with this, doing 18 hours, of speed of processing game over a 10-year period decreased the development, the prevalence of dementia by 48%. Huge. Where did we get 10,000 steps a day? It came from a Japanese pedometer manufacturer, but maybe he had the data, because while 4,000 is better than 2, and 6,000 is better than 4, and 8 is better than 6, and 10 is better than 8, you get no more benefit greater than 10. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter your ethnicity, doesn't matter whether you're trying to reverse diabetes or prediabetes, it's 10,000, and that's the ideal number for all-cause mortality and brain dysfunction. So there are 4 components to maximum health from physical activity. Anything in its step equivalence. You don't like walking, swimming is fine, playing ping pong is fine, playing squash or paddleball are fine, etc. Resistance
3-minute warning, Mike. 3-minute warning.
Resistance exercise 30 minutes a week. Cardio 21 minutes at 3 times a week at 80% of your age-adjusted max, which is 220 minus your age. And there are 2 studies that show if you do HIIT or high intensity at the end, it improves longevity. And again, you're turning on a gene. And the 4th one is 40 jumps a day, 20 morning, 20 night, to increase bone density in hips and lubrication of spinal discs. Walking gives you half the benefit. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. There are some supplements as well, but I'm skipping ahead and say, what does this do to the economy? It is all good. If we live 30 years longer, we're going to probably work 10 to 20 years longer, which saves the Medicare trust fund, it saves the Social Security trust fund, and it actually eliminates our current budget deficits. So 5 tips: change your attitude. You are a genetic engineer for you. Whether you have steak today and damage your epigenes matters compared to if you have salmon today and improve things. Only eat food you love and that loves your body back. You need a team for this that is a buddy, and you want to be able to trust them. Add speed to your body and brain, and manage stress, including cultivating your posse and purpose. I'm done.
Michael, thank you. While you're resting your throat, I will have a couple questions, but I wanted to make a comment. One of the things that Mike points out in his book that I think is very important for all of us at this stage is also to have a team of medical professionals, especially a doctor that you can trust with all the changes. And secondly, the same in your financial world, is to have someone, as Mike, they talk about in the book, having financial team that you can count on to help you out. And your young kids and grandkids, it's even more important, I think, especially for males who say, I don't want to go to a doctor until something's wrong with me. Mike, while others are thinking of questions, and you can raise your hands using that reaction, or in the meantime, if you have questions, I'm curious on those 14 points. In your mind, we see a lot about gene editing and stem cells, for all sorts of cures with stem cells. where do you think in the next 10 or 15 years the biggest changes, exponential changes, are going to be? Gene editing or stem cells?
As you pointed out, the book has 14 different areas. We have no idea where the breakthrough, the least expensive ones are things like bumetanide, which may, at $4 a month, prevent Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia. In fact, the gene therapy that reverses sickle cell disease, they're charging $1 million for the treatment, $1.3 million. It costs $5. It's $5 worth of reagents that they use to do that. So somebody will lower the cost, if you will, because the reagents are relatively cheap. You can do it to a whole body, one injection, gets rid of sickle cell disease in a gene edited way. It's a $5 preparation, but they're charging $1.3 million for it. So the point is, some of these things, such as, for example, the senolytic, the therapeutic plasma exchange, we pay graduate students to donate blood now, so it can't be very expensive, right? And if you want to start doing it now, I'm not advocating that, because we only have one study on it, one randomized controlled study in humans. We have a lot in animal models. But if you want to do it, you can go to your neighborhood Red Cross or plasma donation center, and they'll gladly let you do it and not charge you at all for it currently. So many of these things are relatively inexpensive. The stem cells, there is no proved, except for cancer chemotherapy and stem cell transplants, there is no approved stem cell or exosome therapy in the United States. There are good places that do it in Panama and in Japan for limited uses. There are a bunch of studies now in the US that are randomized controlled, but there aren't any that have randomized controlled studies that have shown enough to get the FDA to approve them.
So all this stuff we read that I can go get a stem cell for my arthritic knee, a shot, is not proven to be effective?
Not only that, it's actually technically illegal according to the FDA. Now, you can get platelet-rich plasma that they take from you and give back to you. If they give it back to you yourself and don't take it out of the room legally, that's approved, that's allowed by the FDA. If they take it out of the room to centrifuge it, believe it or not, that's an FDA violation. But they have, because of they were going to stop all of it and start fining people in 2020, but because of obviously COVID, they got diverted to other things at the FDA. So they're now threatening to start it again. And they've just put a warning out on their website on exosomes, because exosomes, which are often the growth factors given with stem cells, have caused a bunch of allergic reactions and deaths. So they put a warning out not to accept them.
Okay. Anybody? I don't see a raised hand. Do I see anybody with questions?
Yes.
There, Peter Kraus first. Go ahead, Peter. Unmute and ask your question.
Okay, Mike, that was really, really interesting, and of course, have followed your work over time. There are communities that have great longevity, and certain individuals within that community that have great longevity, but entire communities that live long. I'm wondering if they have been studied, I believe, and I'm just wondering how useful that's been in this whole saga.
The Blue Zones has done great to increase awareness and to try and get a group of people to do things that are better for their health. And by the way, we have polluted some of the Blue Zones with American food, if you will. So Okinawa, which used to be one of the Blue Zone communities, now has Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's there, and has shortened their average lifespan, apparently. But the goal of the was to bring awareness. The real data comes from randomized double-blind studies, which confirms physical activity, posse, purpose, eliminating simple sugars in red meat and processed red meat, and, if you will, the full four forms of physical activity, but especially purpose and posse as important for longevity. So they've been, the Blue Zones has been what I would call, and Dan Buettner is published by the same company, if you will, so National Geo. So we're relative friends. And the point is that I think it's been very helpful in motivation and in awareness. But I think the randomized controlled trials are where those of us who want to advise you exactly are have built the science.
Okay, I'm sorry, I have just one other quick question. You mentioned 10,000 steps, but I believe there have been other studies that have suggested that half that may be, I mean, obviously, the more you do, the better, up to 10,000. But I'm just wondering, there have been other studies that suggest that the 5,000 is roughly equivalent. I mean, 10,000 is better.
No. None of the studies have shown that. The headlines from those studies have said all you need to do is 4,000. But in fact, 4,000 is better than 2,000. But no study has shown an optimal effect at less than 9,400. So,
Oh, Peter, oh, rats. I was only going to
Exactly.
walk 9 holes and ride the other 9 holes after you. But now Mike's making me walk the whole course.
So
We're going to have to
So,
do
Peter-
20,000 for the next
so-
5 years.
so Peter, there are mistaken headlines, but the data is pretty clear in every one of the studies so far.
Thanks so much.
Andrew Biner, I think you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So, hi, Mike. Great job. As you know, Mike, but I have had, my medical career has had 2 phases. I was a pulmonary and critical care doctor, and then I migrated, one of the early people involved in sleep medicine. And, I gave a lecture to a cardiac rehab group some years ago, and I said the 3 pillars of health, things that we have control over are exercise, diet, and sleep. And so I think that I wasn't as sophisticated as you, but I think I was on the right track. And I think that some of I feel fine. I've been pretty active, but I think that the health problems that I have experienced probably were for those years of sleep deficit when I was doing critical care, which was both stressful and involved in it. Sleep has actually been a neglected area of medicine, and I think it would be interesting if you eventually you incorporate some of these sleep habits and some of the sleep data on turning on and off these genes. I certainly think that knowing what I know now about sleep, I never would have picked critical care as my specialty.
And Andy, just so you know, in that list of 33 things for health, for brain health, sleep is prominent in there. It's probably 4th or 5th most important based on the data. And it is one of the things, one of the problems, obviously, with analyzing the data, and this is in the weeds, if you will, is when you don't sleep well, you gain weight, you have higher blood pressure, you have increased lipids, and we analyze each of those separately and then covariate. So from a statistical standpoint, sleep itself is very small compared to blood pressure, compared to apolipoprotein B or LDL cholesterol. But because sleep causes those changes, it can be very big, if you will, from a statistical standpoint, and it's probably about 3rd or 4th or 5th on the list of most important. It's very tough, as Andy has pointed out, because of the lack of data separating these areas to get at sleep itself. but I probably wouldn't have written Real Age or done any of the books if I had known how important sleep was. Because literally to do Real Age, which is the first book, I was working 80 hours a week as a department chair, managing anesthesia, critical care, and pain management, and doing some of that night call myself. And then I would go home and have dinner for an hour and then go back to work till 1:30 in the morning, writing the book and doing the science, and then get back at work by 6:30 to teach residents. So it was one of the stupidest things I did for my health, other than having a purpose. So you're absolutely right. Sleep is something that is incredibly important.
And a few other things that about sleep, which was totally neglected, when we were in medical school and our residencies, and I had to teach it myself while working full time. And but the other thing is the important thing about sleep and cognition, that we now know there's neurophysiologic reasons why we sleep. I used to say, people ask me, why do you sleep? I say, so you're not sleepy. But in fact, we now know that there's actual structural changes in the brain during deep sleep, where you actually get to the brain lymphatics actually get to empty.
So
And so it's a fascinating area. And Mike, maybe
let me just comment, Andy, that I would recommend to Larry and Alan that you get a session here to go through that. So one of the things he's talking about is, as you sleep, your brain dehydrates a little, which opens up pathways to get rid of waste, such as the amyloid and tau. And that's one of the benefits of sleeping longer. So I think we should really have you give a session.
Well, I would actually be happy to do it, because again, just with a comment about drugs for insomnia. As of yet, I will say that for chronic insomnia, except for specific disorders, drugs are never the answer for the treatment of insomnia. And in fact, the treatment for insomnia is behavioral. So it all kind of I think works well with the message of your fantastic talk. And if Larry or somebody wants me to, I'd be happy to give a little primer on sleep. I still gave quite a few talks, and I'm still working, and it's like
And Andy, we only have one criteria for coming on Zoom: as long as you don't put us to sleep.
Well, actually, something, Larry, that's actually one of my jokes. If somebody falls asleep during a lecture, boredom doesn't make people sleep; it unmasks your sleepiness. So,
Jim Allen, we'll go to you. Thanks, Andy. Jim, unmute yourself.
So very nice, Mike. Really enjoyed this. Really appreciate it. A clarification on two things that you touched on. One is the word posse. My experience with that word has to do with 1960 Westerns. And I think you mean just a community of friends. Am I getting on the right track?
Yes, it's a community of friends. That's correct.
Okay, so having a cohort of friends is healthy.
A cohort of friends that you're vulnerable to. The data from the Whitehall studies in the UK and the Alameda County studies of Berkman in the US is you need 6 friends you communicate with once a month in a vulnerable way to be the best stress obliterator we have.
Okay, that's very good. And you did mention, Andrew was talking about sleep medications. You mentioned something about taking a sleep medication was positive or negative, like Dramamine occasionally. Is that a bad thing to do?
I'll let Andy go into that. Occasional use, epidemiologically, and that's really all we have the data for, does not seem to increase dementia risk. Chronic use does. And the one article that was the headline yesterday was one of the sleep medicines, Sevorexant, in 38 people studied for 3 days totally, decreased the spinal fluid, tau and amyloid. We don't know the mechanism. We don't know whether it's good or bad, but it got a lot of headlines, which is why I did it. It's way too early. So that's why you need curation of the data.
Ted McPherson is up. Ted, unmute, and you're on.
Hey,
Yeah.
Mike. Thanks, Mike. You mentioned the availability of your list of 33 items. I, for one, would sure like to have that list if you want to email it or however you'd like to do it.
So I'm happy to give the whole set of slides in a PDF, so it's doable because it's too big the other way. To whoever wants, Alan, if you send it out to the class or whatever, I'll be glad to send it to you.
That's great. Mike, along a different line, you're familiar with the term quality of life. There's so many elements related to health and medicine. But if you broaden out the look at it, because many people can have quality of life with varying health or varying physical attributes or whatever. There's so many elements in this. Has there been any work or tried to synthesize or really distill, even though it's very situational, value and quality of life?
Yeah. So this is based on risk of disability and risk of death. But that's slowing aging. That's all of the stuff we did with real age and still do. And that is in the book. In the last third of the book is that. So disability risk is about half and is quality. In a very poor way. It's not a good analysis of quality because some people with disabilities, major disabilities, have high quality.
Right.
But on the other hand, what is coming about is, at least in the animal models, strongly rebooting yourself to 40 gets you the quality of life you had when you were 40, but with the brain power that you have now. Meaning you don't lose memories, you don't lose capacity that you have, or any of the, if you will, Rolodex information in your brain. At least that's what has been shown in the animal studies. So the breakthrough, if one of these 14 areas breaks through, is a huge one for both quality and length. And that's what's the amazing thing. We are emotionally ready for that. I'll bet it's the hardest thing to understand that you're going to get to be 40 again. But with an 80% probability, Ted, you're going to get the serve you had back when you were age 40. So you're going to get to be younger again. And I just saw Greg Meister with his hand up. So, Greg, my wife wants to say hello to you too.
Greg,
I wanted to say
go
hello to
ahead,
Nancy
Greg.
also. So it is good to see you, and thank you very much for tonight, and also for your books, which have made a major impact in my life. It's also good to know that yelling yourself hoarse at a game is not very stressful, but apparently good stress reduction. Good model, Mike. Thank you.
In fact, my wife says I get rid of all my stress by yelling at the referees.
Well, let me ask you a question.
I've only been threatened, by the way, to be thrown out of one game by the referees, which I think is a unique thing as a citizen, as a regular patron, to get thrown out without swearing at them.
Right. Well, I've watched basketball games with you, so I have a sense for what you do. And totally approve of it. Let me ask you a question that I have asked you some of those times when we've had dinner together, because your work habits have always fascinated me. Could you tell me what you've done in terms of work and research in the last 48 hours?
Oh, you're really nasty, Greg. So I did give a talk to a group of 400 people in San Diego on Tuesday, late Tuesday. I took a red eye back to Cleveland because I had two talks to large groups in Cleveland and saw one patient in addition on Wednesday afternoon. And then today I saw patients and did research reading and wrote a column and a blog. Many of you still probably know I have a column that's syndicated to 104 newspapers. That's a daily column, and as well as the longevity playbook carries the longer version of that. So I did see patients. I even added on a patient because he controls a major financial aspect of the government. So he asked to see me this afternoon. So I was a little later than I expected to log on, and probably Larry was nervous because I added him from 4:30 to 5:30 here at the clinic. So, but I have my actual clinic obligation is 50% now, and most of the rest of the time I work with the longevity podcast. From a standpoint of fun, after I gave my last talk, Nancy and I went to the basketball game where we sit next to the commissioner. I have very good seats, if you will, luckily, and was able to yell at the person next to me who was a commissioner's delegate, not the commissioner last night, as well as that referee who wore number 10, who had a very bad game in his calls.
Thank you. Once again, it's really good to see you.
Thanks, Greg. We're, unless we have some really serious questions, I have one question, and I want Ron Bodenson to follow up with a serious question or a little bit of a humorous question. You've got to do it, Ron. I want to ask about the new everyone and all the ads that try to get people to do genetic testing to find out everything that's going to be wrong with them the rest of their life. And this is a little bit like Ted's. You're my doctor, Mike. I come to you, and I've got a daughter with me who's 17, and she says, I'd really like to find out what my future is going to be and what my health risks are going to be, and no history of really serious health risk in the family. What would you advise on genetic testing?
Just to give people a understanding of how fast science has moved, in 1992 to 2001, with the Human Genome Project, it cost about $2.8 billion to get one human genome characterized. Now, if you go to Walmart, it's about $100, except when they have a sale when it's $70. So it has come down in price a huge amount. That will enable, it hasn't yet, but it will enable in the next 10 years for us to do something very useful with knowing your human genome. If we feel ethically, if you feel ethically, and the government feels ethically that we can do that. But for now, screening someone without a family history of significant disease risks has not turned out to be a motivational factor. So when you get 100 people who have a fourfold increased risk of prostate cancer, none of the 100 change behavior. It's been very frustrating, if you will, in that sense. So gene editing and gene therapy, two different things, will be useful in the future. And knowing your genome will be useful in the future, is useful if we're giving you drugs now that affect that. But with that one exception, and the exception of strong family history, there probably is not a reason to do it at this time.
And when we were planning for this meeting, Ron Bodenson had a very good question of how exponential in gene editing and genome theory. And Ron, ask your question to Mike.
I'm just wondering, is there any existing genetic testing or otherwise that would determine once and for all, if we subjected ourselves to it, who among us were the 10%ers?
Well, Michael, this has been fantastic. I have to leave with one more funny. I don't know whether many of you remember Mike's talk at the 40th. If you don't, it's on YouTube and it's worth going back and listening to. Bart's will like this. At the end, when I was just starting to fall off, Mike came up with a very good remedy for heart disease. And I don't know whether you saw it. He said in his talk that if you drink a fifth of bourbon every night, you won't even remember when you had a heart attack. You won't feel it. So I've been doing that my whole life, and I haven't recognized a heart attack, but I got one hell of a hangover each morning. And Mike, I thought that was one of your best slides ever. I can't thank you enough. I can't thank everybody enough. Michael, you've taken enough of your time in a busy time. I really, for those of you, since Mike's going to dedicate all the royalties of his latest book to Williams College, I urge you all to purchase The Great Age Reboot because it contains. Mike, are you pledging that tonight? No, I can't thank you enough.
Why not? Thanks. Thank you all. It's a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Take care of your throat, Michael. Take it seriously. Rest it.
I will. No more yelling tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Terrific.
You still playing squash, Mike?
Unfortunately, I gave up I had to give up some for the time, and I gave up in 2000. You know, what happened is
The ball got softer. That's what happened.
well, you may understand this, Chuck. I actually competed. I'm so competitive that when I was playing I was playing Cornell team members, and when I was playing them, I would hate to lose, so I would not lose easily. And when I'd come home, I couldn't walk for 3 days, so because I wasn't in as good shape. So,
Well,
Nancy,
the softer ball didn't help you any.
no,
Yeah.
that's right.
He went to ping pong, Chuck, and Mike. I'll tell you one thing. Ted McPherson can tell you. I'd love to go to any sporting event with you and challenge your ability to get on the refs versus mine. And it has to be done in a humorous and intellectual way to get their attention. I've probably got more refs come over to me and say, those are good ones, rather than getting mad at. Good night, guys. Thank you all
night.
very much.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks,
Thank you
guys.
very much.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Read those